Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathleen Sullivan, and I work with an organization called Hibakusha Stories. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. I know that our room was filled earlier and people have their jobs and their homes to go to, but every single person that came here this evening came here because they believe in something, and I think that that's a beautiful thing about our country. I have just spent the last 2 weeks working with atomic bomb survivors. We've been in 18 schools in 4 of the 5 boroughs of New York City. We've seen over 2,000 students. I think something that we lose sight of is that nuclear reactors were developed because of the nuclear bomb. Hanford in Richland, Washington was the world's first nuclear reactor. Every reactor produces plutonium. It has a half-life of 24,000 years, it causes cancer, and it increases the risk of genetic mutation, which lasts forever. I'm sorry to correct something earlier that a few of our brave and compassionate speakers have been talking about, which is that in Japan, currently, the reactors are offline. You probably are all aware of this. They have not been shut down. The Japanese government wants to continue with nuclear power, and it is the Japanese people who are fighting the reactors in Japan, not the government. And, you know, I look at the people in this room and all of us, NRC, Energy workers, Indian Point workers, activists, moms and dads, we're all here because we care about our world. And I know I only have a few seconds more to speak so that other people can continue, but if we could just all engage in a thought experiment right now and think about what we love about being alive and what we cherish and who we cherish, and recognize that everything we love is threatened by the existence of nuclear weapons and nuclear power. This is not an abstract issue, this is a personal issue. Nuclear power is on its way out. We need to move towards decommissioning. Those workers need to have jobs and use their expertise. We need to rid the world of weapons that can end all life on Earth in the spate of an afternoon, or we suffer the slow death of radiological contamination. At the moment, in Unit 4 at Fukushima, there are in excess of 1,000 fuel assemblies that are exposed to the open air. If an earthquake, which is a very seismically active area already, should disturb that already vulnerable building, this could cause a massive radiological release that could affect the northern hemisphere.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
This is our issue, all of us in this room. Thank you, Carl, for your facilitation. And please let us work together to hasten our exit from the nuclear age.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Perfect. My name is Emily McLone, and I'm working as the director of Peace Boat US, an international and nonprofit organization that has our base in Tokyo, Japan, and also here in Manhattan. I would just like to share a little bit about my experience living in Japan when this nuclear accident happened. Let me tell you that it wasn't easy. People were confused. The general public didn't know what was happening. The media in the United States and abroad was completely different from the media that was in Japan. And nobody can control the information that is shared. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation. And I was surprised to find out when I moved to New York a few months ago that we have Indian Point so close. And I was disappointed in the American people and the government and people like yourselves for continuing to have nuclear power in the United States. And I was even more disappointed when I came to this meeting today thinking that we're going to have some action or some response from your side. And instead, I received a paper at the door saying that Indian Point is right for New York because it provides clean, reliable, and low-cost electricity. Let me ask you where the low cost comes from for this electricity. Where does the uranium come from that's dug up? Where is it reprocessed? How is it created? Where does nuclear energy come from, and where is that cost? That cost is not included in the money that we pay for nuclear energy. And not only that, but this is completely a lie on this paper. This should not be allowed to be distributed, this kind of misinformation. Indian Point safely and reliably provides electricity. How is nuclear energy safe? What happened in Japan and what I just experienced, and the young people and the old people and the women and the children and the men who live in that area are not safe, and they cannot return to their homes. They had to evacuate. How are you going to evacuate New York City? It's impossible. There is no such plan that's going to work for a city as large as ours, and there was no such plan for Tokyo when I was living there. And that's why Tokyo was not evacuated. And that's why still they continue to be under the threat of nuclear radiation in a city that's large and can't be evacuated. So I just like to think about...
You turned the microphone off by touching it.
Anyway, my voice is loud enough. I would just like you to think about what happened in Fukushima, and I would like you to take it to your heart. And as Kathleen said, think about everything that you love in your life, and think about how it's going to be affected when there's a nuclear accident.
Give me a microphone.
Because nuclear accidents, let me borrow yours, thank you. Nuclear accidents do happen, and it's technological failure and it's human error, which is not possible to avoid. And the workers that were here today, I know that Indian Point provides jobs for all of them, but let me tell you that the workers at Fukushima do not want to be there now. They're in danger, they're being exposed to radioactivity, and they won't go there for more than a couple hours at a time because they're not allowed. And those workers will lose their jobs because they can't continue. Their health is affected. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Alfred Meyer. I'm a member of Physicians for Social Responsibility. I'm here today because I'm very concerned about my health, the health of my wife, my son, and my family, and all the other citizens in this area. And I want to talk about something that I haven't heard talked about yet today, and that is potassium iodide, which is important to take before exposure to radiation to block thyroid uptake of radioactive iodine. And I want to ask you some very specific questions, please. Where can I get potassium iodine? Do you happen to have any of it here tonight? How much do I have to take? And how often do I have to take it? And for how long to be protected from radioactivity? In other words, I want to know how many doses per person in my household do I need? I'd also like to know, and I hope to get these questions answered tonight, what the shelf life of potassium iodide is. In other words, if I get some tonight, when do I have to get a fresh batch? And on a larger scale, I'd like to ask how many doses of potassium iodine are stored within a 50-mile radius of Indian Point? And in the event of a catastrophe, how will they be distributed in time to provide protection from exposure to radioactive iodine? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Meyer, I don't know that I can answer all of your questions. I will share a couple of insights that I have relative to potassium iodide. Over the years that potassium iodide has been distributed, there's been some changes in shelf life. I think the latest now is 7 years. The potassium iodide that's getting issued now, I believe, is a 7-year half-life, but don't quote me on that, but I think it has that shelf life. Relative to distribution, about a decade or so ago, when there was discussion in this country about how would potassium iodide get to citizens in areas surrounding nuclear power plants, the NRC agreed to provide the states that have nuclear power plants in them or that have plant or areas within the emergency protective zone, 10-mile EPZ. We would pay for the potassium iodide that they requested, as well as replenish them as shelf life has been reached. And we've been doing that for the past decade. The responsibility for the distribution of potassium iodide is in the hands of the states. The NRC purchases it and gets it to them, and then the way they distribute it is up to however the state wants to do it.
So do you know how many...
Hold on 1 second, please. I'm not going to give you my phone. Hold it for you.
Do you know how many doses of potassium iodine has been requested by the state of New York, the state of Connecticut, and the state of New Jersey?
I can get that information to you. I do not have that. I can get that information to you. We'll take a note of that. If you can give us your email or some way we can get that information to you, we'd appreciate it.
I'd be happy
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Andrew Cantor. I'm actually president of PSR, Physicians for Social Responsibility. I do thank all of you for coming tonight. I know this is a difficult time, or it's not just a difficult time, it's a difficult job, and also for all of my neighbors who, because I actually do live in New York City, who also came here to talk to you and to listen to you. People have spoken much more eloquently than I can about the risks and the dangers of nuclear power, specifically Indian Point, the spent fuel rods, the risk of accidents, and the evacuation zones issues. Now, PSR and Union Concerned Scientists and others have run simulations in the past. We've published these and first responder consequences of a potential core meltdown at nuclear power plants around the United States. And up to now, this was all hypothetical. And we talked about hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of deaths, and long-term consequences of radioactive contamination. Now, Fukushima is just happened. And if Tokyo had been in the location of where New York is, we would be having a very different discussion right now, just because of the way the wind would happen to be going for that period of time. We know that looking at the CTBTO data, that the way the plumes moved, the exposure of the populations around that nuclear power plant were considerable, and would have been a lot worse if the wind just happened to have been blowing the other direction. So my question really for you, in terms of the, and I would like a response, whether the new watered down, or maybe that's inappropriate description, but let's say the new keyhole type evacuation zones, what does this actually mean? And you know, I'm a brand new father and a physician, and I, in good conscience, have to answer to my son about what does this actually mean. And for the people who used to be sitting over there who were in favor, but who live around the nuclear power plant, can you tell exactly to them what their exposures would be? What does it really mean to them to be sitting in their homes during this situation? Could you talk about what the doses would be? Because all radiation is dangerous, and all radioactive contamination results in some medical and public health consequences. So I think that it's not hypothetical anymore. So what would their exposures be? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. To answer your question, what you're referring to, I believe, is information that the NRC and FEMA have put out in conjunction with the new emergency preparedness rule. And what they have put out is information that indicates 4 decision makers for protective actions. If there were to be an event, in the case of Indian Point, the 4 counties surrounding Indian Point have protective action recommendation authority. They're the ones who make the determination: do we evacuate? Do we evacuate a keyhole? Do we shelter in place? You know, what do we do relative to how to best protect the public? And the information you're referring to is information from the NRC that says in the toolkit or the quiver of potential recommendations they can make, sheltering is something they should consider. It's not something that the NRC is mandating or requiring. All they're saying is that, depending on the scenario and the situation, consideration of sheltering in certain areas may be the appropriate action for a period of time. For example, if the plume is moving over a certain area and you know it's going to move, you know, fairly quickly because of the wind direction and speed, it's better to try and shelter people in place and allow the plume to pass over before you attempt to try and evacuate. So there's no requirement that they do that. All it is information that's available to those members of states or counties that have decision-making responsibility in the event of a nuclear event, of things that they could consider.
But you said that is the
hold
alternative.
on, please.
But the point being that is being given as the alternative in the situation where there is no feasible way to evacuate 19 million people from the from the metropolitan area. So if you're not going to evacuate them, then let's be really honest about what we're expecting them to have to endure. Because it's not really fair to allow the people coming here to believe that there is safety, or that there is a likely safe response to this, when there really isn't one.
Yeah, thank you.
We are two of many raging grannies. We live in Westchester. There are others in New York City who weren't able to come tonight. We are not, unlike the other wonderful person who sang before, we are not, as you'll soon realize, actually singers of any kind. We are activists who express ourselves sort of musically. And this is an ad hominem, and feminine in this case, addressed to the NRC in particular. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, we are a gaggle of grannies, urging you off of your fannies. Indian Point is a dangerous joint, shut it down. With all that entity spending to keep their license from ending, you'd think they go broke with mirrors and smoke, shut it down. The NRC approves them, they tell us so cleverly. The NRC is a lapdog to the nuclear industry. We may be a gaggle of grannies, but we've gotten off of our fannies. Stop energy spin, if they lose we win. Shut it down, we really mean it. Shut it down, we mean business. Shut it down.
Thank you. I love the raging granny. We really don't have any more time, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bean. So he can make closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to make, I think, 3 comments. One is, even though I think that we had some periods where there's some outbursts, I do want to compliment all of you, particularly those of you remaining in the room, for, in general, the respectfulness with which you listen to everybody's views. And something that Ms. Sullivan said really resonated with me, and it was that people came here with a belief and wanted to express their views, and it's because they all care about the world, whether they're talking about they want to relicense the plant, they want to shut it down, or whatever, and I thought those were great words. And last but not least, I want to leave you again with what I've expressed several times, is that relative to the public health and safety, it's the most important thing to us, all of us here at the table, and the other NRC people in this room, and the entire agency.
Keep it going.
Anyway, thank you all for coming, and thanks for your contribution to this process.